Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a huge idea, one that's at the very heart of political philosophy, the social contract. All right, let's just jump right in with the big one, right? A question that philosophers have wrestled with for centuries. What actually gives a government the right to rule over you? I mean, is it just that they have the biggest army? Or is there something deeper going on? This isn't just some abstract thought exercise. Philosophers have a name for this. They call it the problem of political legitimacy. And what it's really about is justifying power. How do you prove you have the right to rule, not just the might to rule? And one of the most powerful, most lasting answers to that question, well, it comes from this idea of building a better social contract. So today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to trace the story of that idea all the way from a revolutionary concept to a modern blueprint for society. Okay, let's get into it. And our first stop is with the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He's the guy who really came along and breathed new life into this whole social contract thing. So here was Rousseau's big move. He argued that true legitimacy, the real right to rule, it just can't come from force. It has to be something you can justify to every single person, to their own rational will. It's about convincing people, not just forcing them to obey. Okay, to really get what he's talking about, let's use a simple example. Picture this. You've got two people, Nicholas and Teddy. And Nicholas, being stronger, just attacks Teddy and steals his weapon. Now, imagine if the rules of their society, we'll call it the Nicholas Convention, actually said this was okay. What if the law of the land was basically just might makes right? For Rousseau, this is the absolute key. That rule would be totally illegitimate. Why? Because it completely bypasses Teddy's will. It treats him like an object, not like a person with a say in his own life. He has no voice, no choice, and for Rousseau, that's the very definition of injustice. So this way of thinking led Rousseau to his most famous and, let's be honest, kind of confusing solution. He said that legitimate laws have to reflect what he called the general will. Now, this isn't just adding up what everyone wants for themselves. No, it's something bigger. It's the will of the entire community, aimed at what's good for everyone. And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures what Rousseau was aiming for. His dream was a society where the laws you obey are, in a way, laws you've given to yourself, because you're part of the community that made them. So when you follow the law, you're actually just obeying your own rational will, and that's how you can be part of a society and still be free. Okay, so general will sounds great, but it's pretty abstract, right? I mean, how do we actually figure out what it is? Well, that's the exact question our next philosopher decided to tackle. So let's jump forward in time, about 200 years, actually. An American philosopher named John Rawls comes along, and he basically picks up right where Rousseau left off with his incredible book, A Theory of Justice. So to figure out what a truly just society looks like, Rawls gives us this amazing thought experiment. He calls it the original position. And the idea is, imagine you get to be one of the people designing the basic rules of society, right from scratch. But there's a catch. A really brilliant one, actually. The single most important rule of this little game is that you have to do it from behind what he calls a veil of ignorance. So what does that mean? Well, behind this veil, you know nothing about who you're going to be in this new society. You don't know if you're going to be rich or poor. You don't know your race, your gender, your natural talents, or even your religious beliefs. By wiping the slate clean, the veil forces you to be totally impartial. You can't rig the game in your own favor because you have no idea which playing piece you're going to be. And Rawls's argument was pretty simple. He said that any rational person in that situation would choose principles that are fair for everybody. Why? Because it's a gamble. You'd want to design a system that protects you even if you end up in the worst possible position in society. So that's a really neat idea, right? Super elegant. But it does bring up a pretty big practical question. Okay, but seriously, why should we care? Why should the choices of these hypothetical people in some imaginary room have any bearing on us, here, in the real world? I mean, it's a totally fair question. Well, Rawls had an answer for that, and he called it reflective equilibrium. And the key thing to get here is that it's not about just blindly accepting whatever comes out of the thought experiment. Instead, think of it like a back and forth process, a balancing act. You take the principles you got from the original position, and you hold them up against your own deep-seated gut feelings about justice. Your intuitions, and you go back and forth, tweaking the theory here, questioning your intuitions there, until the two things kind of click into place, until they form a stable, coherent picture of justice. But, and this is a big but, That whole process relies on our intuitions, our gut feelings. And that might just be a crack in the foundation of this whole beautiful system. Think about it. What if our intuitions about what's fair aren't some universal truth? What if they're just a product of our culture, our upbringing, our moment in history? That would mean they could be full of inconsistencies, or worse, just plain biased. And that leads to an even more disturbing question. What if our common sense about justice is just flat out wrong? What if the things we feel are right actually lead to people living less happy, less fulfilled lives? And that leaves us with this huge, lingering challenge. You see, the whole point of this social contract idea was to figure out how to have a just society without having to agree on what makes a life good. But maybe that's just not possible. Can we really build a fair world if we can't first agree on what it means to live well? And honestly, that's the question that's still echoing through philosophy today.